Good morning, everyone. And whether you're joining us live or watching on catch up, we offer you a very warm welcome to this interactive online event. I'm Fiona Hims, a member of the NAHT Professional Development Team, and this is NAHT's New Heads Conference 2022. Some brief housekeeping, if I may, just before we begin. To attend each session today, please start with the agenda. From the agenda, you can navigate to the main event and chat area for keynote speakers. A joining link will be available in the right-hand description for the breakout sessions. If you want captions, you can request these now in your control panel. Please be aware that your screen name and any comments made may be seen by other attendees. Please do set your screen to full screen mode at the start of the day to ensure you can access all of the functions on your toolbar. And use the toolbar along the bottom or top of your screen to post a question, raise a hand, or chat to other attendees. Please remain muted to reduce any background noise and feedback unless asked to unmute. To start with, the audio and video is automatically set to off. A copy of the materials will be shared after this event via email, and the conference page will be open for 30 days, so you can revisit any missed content. This may take up to 48 hours to become available. Now, as a fully virtual event, which is very exciting, there are many ways to engage throughout the day. Please do visit our exhibitions during the breaks by clicking on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You accumulate points as you visit exhibitions and sponsors. And we've got some amazing prizes here, because as you go to more places of the virtual platform, you will score points. And the prizes that we're offering today are 50 trees planted in your name from NAHT, a 1-month trial for your school for the award-winning Meeting Owl, School Leaders Thrive programme from NAHT Wellness and Protect, a 6-month whole school subscription to Lifter, and a goodie bag from Discovery Education. And we know the more places you visit, the more points you score, and those are the prizes that you can win. So please do take part. I'd like to also say a special thank you today to our sponsor, NAHT Discovery Education Pathway. The NAHT and Discovery Education Pathway programme brings a fresh approach to CPD, offering a blend of personal and professional development courses for teachers and leaders. It's a holistic programme that supports the continuous professional empowerment of teachers and leaders in today's schools. Everyone who joins us today, everyone virtually or on catch-up, will be entitled to a free trial of NAHT Discovery Education Pathway. So I hope you got all that, and now let's begin. It's with great pleasure that I can now introduce you to the chair of today's conference, head teacher, education advisor, and series editor of NAHT Discovery Education Pathway, Andrew Hammond.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fiona. And it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to be chairing this with you, Fiona. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Busy day ahead. But then when isn't it a busy day? Pace can be frenetic, can't it, in schools? Doesn't matter whether you've been a head teacher for 6 months, a year, or 20 years. The pace just seems to be rather frenetic in this constant pursuit of perfection. High stakes accountability sometimes, but perhaps with fewer resources as well. I don't know if anyone else feels like a football manager, but sometimes I do. It's a giant logic puzzle, isn't it? I mean, it's a giant logic puzzle, it seems to me, particularly with sort of staff absence and so forth. No one chooses to be poorly, as I always say, but it does bring even more sort of logic problems, logic puzzles to our in-tray every day. But there are common threads, aren't there, between us? Shared goals, shared challenges, shared difficulties, shared needs. And I think that's what today's about. That's what NAHT is about. It's about supporting us and helping us stay in control, isn't it? And retain that sense of control. You know, I often say that schools, I think, are a bit like financial institutions, only their contents are perhaps more valuable. We need certainty and we need control. And I think those two things have been in short supply in the last few years. And I think the benefit of the purpose of conferences like today, and indeed NAHT, is to help us stay in control. We are the barometer, after all, aren't we, of our schools. And I often think It's not just our efficiency, our organizational skills, thank goodness in my case, our managerial skills, our leadership skills even. It's not just those that make us valuable. I honestly think it's us. It's our character, our joie de vivre, our relentless and robust optimism and belief that makes us so valuable to our school. So I hope today tops all of those levels up for you. And with that in mind, great segue into a man who probably needs no introduction really to you, Serdar Ferit, co-CEO of Lifter, who everybody on the call will be very familiar with and will have seen Serdar speak and know the value of Lifter, nurturing empathy, curiosity and hope with real human stories. So I'm going to hand over to you, Serdar, for a mate. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. Colleagues, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Serdar Ferit. I'm a former filmmaker and teacher, and I'm now the CEO of Lifter, which I founded 6 years ago with my partner. And at Lifter, I've combined my passion and experience in education and storytelling with my brilliant colleagues to help teachers and leaders to broaden the horizons of their students. My colleagues and I believe that education is about human flourishing, academic, social, and emotional flourishing. It's about developing good people who contribute to a better world and a world in which we should all feel belonging. Looking to the future, what awaits our children and how might we best support them so they can flourish, so they can thrive in our changing world? I'm going to share just a very few slides and 3 short videos with you today, which I hope will provide interesting provocations. I'm going to just play this. So this is a slide that is we've been looking at future-looking organizations, what they've been telling us about the future for a number of years at Lifter. And we've seen it change ever so slightly quite recently. So they've been telling us that by 2030, the whole world is going to change. The whole landscape of the economy is going to change. Up to 800 million people may be displaced from work due to automation and AI. And that actually advanced economies like ours will be more affected than developing economies and emerging economies. Since the pandemic, they've actually said that this is actually happening quicker than we first thought. But what we've also noticed that there's a bigger emphasis on humanity. And actually the word humanity is starting to creep into these very serious reports. So this is a quote from the World Economic Forum. We will need to be much better at being human, an area where our education systems are notoriously weak. This one is from the Boston Consulting Group. Demand for human skills and compassionate human interaction will increase. And this has, among lots of dark things that have happened over the last few years, this gives us a little bit of hope. Moving from future-looking organizations to the future. This is what children and young people have been telling us. This is a huge study by Ipsos a couple of years ago during the pandemic. They're telling us that they're anxious about the future. They feel a responsibility to make things better, but they also tell us that they want to learn more about the real world. And this is what we're trying to support children with Lifter and teachers with Lifter. And I'm just going to share a short video with you to show you what Lifter is and what it does.
In a word, being able to instantly teleport yourself to halfway across the world while staying on the same spot.
It's absolutely amazing. Like, you could get lost in a completely other world.
I hope my screen has changed. If it hasn't, please stop me. So at Lifter, we invite teachers and children to explore the world. We invite them to the homes and workplaces of lots of different people from around the world, where they can look around different spaces. They can click on various multimedia to read rich media articles, to look at infographics, and in each space that they visit, there's always at least one human being that they can bring to life in the form of a powerful short documentary film. In terms of quality, we don't cut corners. We work with the best filmmakers in the world. Our head of stories is former head of documentary from The Guardian, Charlie Phillips. From a pedagogy perspective, we don't cut corners. Our head of education, Dr. Harriet Marshall, and Lisa Tanner work with brilliant educators around the country and around the world to make the highest quality learning resources. And we also pay a lot of attention to training and helping teachers to understand how to use Lifter. We also work really hard to make it super easy to use, and we test it on my parents, who are both retired teachers. We help schools to deliver rich cross-curricular learning, and here are some of the areas that we really support with. So nurturing and teaching cultural capital, key concepts about equality and diversity, sustainability and climate education, character education and social emotional learning, two things that have become even more important over the last couple of years, healthy relationships and respect, and critical digital literacy. I'm going to move to what children have been telling us about their Lifter experiences before giving you a final message and handing over back to Andrew.
Great website. I love it.
It drew me in, and it was how it was set out.
It's more engaging than just watching something on a screen.
Because you can press stuff and then it do stuff.
Because you're there and you're immersed in it, and you can interact with it more than just reading it, and you can see it and be it.
We come back and we see that Lifter's on. Everyone sort of goes, yes. It's because it educates you in a fun way.
It taught us in a good way that we would remember it
And understand it
as well.
You didn't have to work hard to keep your focus. You could work hard to learn. You could use that energy on learning.
I hope this is the future of learning, I guess. I hope it is.
When you grow up in your area, you know your story and you know the stories of the people you're around, but you don't know the stories of people who've had completely different upbringings. I think hearing stories from people across the globe, it sort of puts everything in perspective.
In real life, we're glued to one outlook. We can only see what we see. We can only feel what we feel. If we somehow allow ourselves to interact our emotions and our viewpoints with other people's, then we can become better than if it was only one person.
Very, very impactful. They helped kind of structure this idea of kind of common humanity between all of us, this idea of connectivity and diversity across the world. And I genuinely think that younger children being exposed to that more often would be crucial to their education, because it shows them their world is not flat or 2D. It shows them the wider world. When I was younger, I grew up in a very rural area of this country and didn't really see the world outside of it. Didn't see a motorway until I was 10. And I think if I was younger and I'd been shown those things, it would have been a lot more impactful for me.
Thank you for watching that, colleagues. At Lifter, our vision is that by the time a child completes their education, they'll have had an opportunity to have a meaningful learning experience in every country in the world. They'd have met lots of different people from lots of different slices of life, people from different professions, cultures, backgrounds and identities. They'll be able to see for themselves how interconnected and how interdependent we are. And we believe that this will be a gift for our children as they enter the world as adults. If you'd like to come on this journey with us, we'd love to welcome you. And actually, we are doing a study at the moment while also demonstrating Lifter. And we're offering schools £100 to be a part of that. It's a 60-minute meeting where we would like to speak to the head teacher and one member of SLT. And it's no strings attached. And at the beginning, we conduct a study which has been designed by Dr. Harriet Marshall, our head of education. And then we demonstrate Lifter, and it's no strings attached. And when schools participate in that, they will receive £100. And we are writing that report, and that will be published later this year. If that's of interest, please click the link I've just put into the chat and find a date that works for you. We're conducting all of those over May and June this year, and the study should be published in autumn. Thank you very much, and I wish you a great conference.
Thank you very much, Serdar. That was absolutely fascinating. And the children's testimonials were just superb, weren't they? I loved it. You can press stuff and you can do stuff. You can see it and be in it. I just thought that was wonderful. And when that lovely young chap said, it shows you the world is not flat, I thought that was brilliant, actually. And I love the fact that you actually also emphasize the importance of interdependence. I think in so many cases, in so many schools, we find ourselves talking about independent learning, independent thinking, encouraging children to be independent, finding their independence. I've always said it's about interdependence and the interconnectedness of all of us. And I think your Lifter encapsulates that beautifully. So thank you. That was really inspiring, as always. As always. Thank you. Great. So do pursue the link in the chat if you wish. And I know Serdar and his team will be very, very pleased to hear from you. And let's help our students explore the world. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Lucy Crehan for the next piece. Lucy's an education explorer, an international education consultant. She taught science and psychology at a secondary school in London before completing a master's in education at Cambridge. She then spent time working in schools and living with education superpowers, in 6 top performing education systems. The basis for a book, Cleverlands, The Secrets Behind the Success of the World's Education Superpowers, one of The Economist's Book of the Year, 2016. And on her return, Lucy wrote a book on teacher career structures for IEP, UNESCO, International Institute for Education Planning, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, of course. And she spent a year working as part of a team advising foreign governments on education reform at the Education Development Trust. And she's now an independent consultant and is conducting research for her 3rd book. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's really lovely to be here. First thing to say to all of you is obviously congratulations on your new roles, whether it was a little while ago or whether it's coming up. What a incredible thing that you're doing. Being a school leader is one of the most impactful jobs I think you can have. I'm the daughter of 2 head teachers, so I've kind of seen firsthand what it's like, even though I have never done it myself. I'm certainly not qualified to be doing your roles, but I do have some knowledge in some other areas that I hope to share with you this morning. I'm going to start by introducing myself a little bit, and then I'm going to talk to you about some lessons from the world's top performing education systems. So I began my career in teaching in England. I taught at a secondary school in southwest London in Feltham, and I had deliberately chosen to teach in a school that was in a reasonably challenging area, by which I mean in terms of socioeconomic disadvantage. Some of the children were coming from some quite difficult home backgrounds. And so I was fully anticipating the job being difficult. What I hadn't anticipated was the nature of the job, where it became difficult because of education policy, essentially. So it was difficult additionally because myself and my colleagues were working long hours, and I'm sure this will be a story that many of you, that will resonate with many of you, working really long hours, spending time on things that I didn't feel were particularly helpful for the children. Because I don't think, well, I can only speak for myself, but I didn't mind at the time. This is when I was in my early 20s, didn't have children. I didn't mind working long hours if I felt that that was going to have an impact on the kids in my care. But in this instance, it didn't feel like that was the case. It was driven by accountability pressures. So I became both frustrated by the system, but also therefore very interested in systems, in education policy, in different ways that education systems can be managed for better and for worse, particularly because at the time I was teaching, this was when Michael Gove was Education Secretary of England, and he kept talking about high-performing systems. And we're going to strengthen the league tables because that's what they're doing in these high-performing systems. And it just didn't make any sense to me, because I could see the effects that it was having in my school. And, you know, speaking to friends of mine teaching in other schools, it seemed that they were in a similar situation. And yet he was saying that, oh, well, it's working elsewhere. So I became very interested in what these countries were doing. Decided to do a master's in education policy to study it a bit more. And I just felt at the time that I couldn't really get a proper understanding of what these systems were like just from reading about them, or just from looking at individual policies one by one. What I needed was to get a sense of how all those policies work together in an actual context, in an actual unique cultural context as well. So I wrote to teachers, I say wrote to, emailed, or Facebooked, or wasn't on Twitter at the time. I don't know if Twitter existed at the time, but in a number of the world's high performing systems based on PISA. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second as well. And I was able to go to all of the countries that I'd written to 6 different systems, and help out in schools. So that was my message to them, was that I'm a teacher from England. I'm really interested to find out what you're doing in your countries. Can I please come and help out? Basically, I was offering to volunteer, teach in their schools, or help out, or hear children read, or do their photocopying, anything I could do to kind of convince them to let me come and just be around and learn a bit about what they're doing. And I also said, can I stay with you too, please? Partly, you know, I couldn't afford to do this trip if I hadn't done that. But honestly, the main reason was that I think that the people who really understand what is going on in the system and what is working well and what's not working well are the teachers. They're the people who work in it every day. And I've since coming back, since writing my book, I've had the opportunity to have conversations with more senior people within a system, policymakers, and they don't understand what's going on in schools like teachers do. You know, the people who you really need to talk to get a sense of a system are the teachers. So I did stay with teachers. I spent a month in each of these countries. So I was in Finland, Canada, Japan, Shanghai, China, Singapore, and then New Zealand as well. And I've just included this picture at the top left here, just to illustrate one of my trickier moments, which was when I'd spent in Shanghai. I was in a few different schools. So I'd spent a week in a school in quite a nice, well-to-do area that was doing some interesting experimental stuff. I'd spent a week in a school for migrant children in Shanghai, but they're Chinese kids, but they are migrants to Shanghai because of the way the system operates there, which meant that they were typically the children of the workers from elsewhere in China, and less educated and often less well off. So that was a very contrasting school to visit. And I wanted to just spend my remaining time in a school that was more kind of middle of the road in terms of the background of the kids. So like a local neighborhood school near the house of the teacher I was staying with. And all of the schools in China all schools in Shanghai have security guards outside, look like these ones. And I had 10 Mandarin lessons on Skype before I went to Shanghai. So I thought I'd put this into use. And I went up to the security guards and I said, 我是英国人，我是老师，我看学校. I hope none of you speak Mandarin. I think that means something like, I'm a teacher, I'm from England, can I look at your school? And I'm not sure I made any sense at all, because he just stared at me with a blank face, looked confused, and I just stood there and smiled at him. And eventually he picked up the phone and said what I can only imagine was something like, there's a crazy English woman outside, please send someone down who speaks English. And they did. So a very polite, lovely woman came down and invited me to come back to spend some time in the school the following week. So that was the scariest experience. I did teach in all of the countries I visited, although in some countries much more than in others. So I was of more use to the non-English speaking countries I was in. So I taught a lot in Finland and in Shanghai, less so in Singapore and in Canada. And I interviewed everyone, young and old. And this is my youngest interviewee, and he is telling me about the effects of the Confucian culture on differentiation in primary schools. So I said I'd talk a little bit about PISA. I just want to acknowledge to begin with that PISA isn't everything. It only measures certain things. I mean, the OECD that run it do try and measure everything, but they can't. You know, there are certain educational goods, really, really important things within education that just can't be measured, or certainly aren't measured by PISA. But what it does measure is useful. So it's the Programme for International Student Assessment, designed back in the 90s to measure children's performance at the end of compulsory schooling. So that's internationally, typically in developed contexts, 15 to 16. This is the crucial bit, is it testing the application of skills in reading, maths and science. It's not testing your straightforward knowledge in reading, maths and science. It's not asking you to solve an equation or to define photosynthesis. It's presenting you with the kind of problems that children will come across in their lives as citizens, or in their working lives, and it's asking them to use what they know to solve those problems. So it is quite useful, and you can't do well in these tests just through rote learning, just because of the nature of the test. So I think a lot of people who haven't had as much time to kind of read about it and research it as I have, they see that it's East Asian countries that perform very highly in these tests, and so they think, oh well, that must be because in East Asia they just rote learn everything, children memorize the textbook without understanding and then regurgitate it on the test. And that cannot explain how they do well in these tests, because if you were to memorize a textbook without understanding it, you wouldn't be able to do a PISA test. You'd perform poorly. So actually, these high-performing East Asian systems and other systems are managing to educate their children to actually understand what it is they're learning and use it, which is something that's important, isn't it? So what I'm going to do today is briefly give you a very, very big picture overview. So of essentially the underlying philosophy that I found that these systems have, the kind of, if I have to condense my learnings from these systems down into just one thing, and then a few more practical things that you can do in your schools that allow schools in these systems to commit to that underlying philosophy. So this is the philosophy of genuinely high expectations. Please stay with me. Don't switch off. Sounds really obvious. I know, sounds really glib. Everyone thinks they have high expectations. I thought I had high expectations when I started teaching. My whole teacher training was all about having high expectations. I did not know what high expectations genuinely looked like, I don't think, when I was teaching. I'm not saying that no teachers in England have high expectations, but I personally just hadn't understood it. I think what I had when I was teaching was high hopes. I had really hoped that, you know, everyone in my Set 2 science class would get at least a C, and that these two would get a B. But genuinely high expectations, I think, looks different, and it shows in the way the systems are organized. And although I say systems, a lot of this is relevant to schools in terms of what, depending on which country you're calling in from, there's slightly more or less autonomy, but there's still a lot that you can do, whichever home nation you're calling in from. There's a lot that you can do to have genuinely high expectations in your schools at a structural level. So in four, I'm just trying to get rid of my face because my face is blocking what I'm trying to say, and I've seen it too much already. There we go. So in 4 out of the 5 systems I visited, so I've put 5 there, and I wrote about 5 in my book. I did visit New Zealand as well. I didn't end up writing about, but New Zealand is the same. So in 5 of the 6 systems I visited, and 9 out of the 10 PISA top performers, if you take an average of the different subjects tested, students are not tracked into different schools until 15 or 16. So they are genuinely comprehensive systems. And I know that's not the case everywhere in the UK. It is the case in some places in the UK. This is where we differ in terms of the different countries represented. But the exception there internationally was Singapore, But if you have a look at the relationship between comprehensive education and equity, there is substantial international evidence that systems that delay tracking and they wait to select students into different schools until they're 15 or 16, they are much more equitable than systems that start tracking earlier. Even though Singapore tracks earlier, its equity record is not that impressive. But I'm not going to focus on anymore on the system level stuff, because I want to focus on stuff that is within your power to change. So let's take that within schools. So in those same systems, in those 4 or 5 systems, they also weren't selected into different classes on the basis of ability either, or attainment. So not only are they not streaming children into different schools, they're not streaming or setting children into different classes either in the main. Canada started setting for maths at the end of lower secondary school, so at about age 14. But apart from that, mixed attainment teaching all the way up to the end of compulsory schooling. And if you look at the research on this, this is you might recognize this graphic from the Education Endowment Foundation website. Overall, the evidence is pretty consistent that setting and streaming doesn't have much of an effect on attainment overall, slightly negative effect. It has a significantly negative effect on the lowest attainers, and sometimes occasionally smaller positive effects on the highest attainers if they're set into those different groups. But it's terrible from an equity perspective, as you can imagine. If you're going to introduce an intervention where it is disproportionately worse for those who are already at the bottom in terms of that attainment, it's just appalling from an equity perspective. And yet it's very, very common for all sorts of kind of historical and potentially some good reasons. But what opened my eyes is that how uncommon it was in these high performing systems and how they made that work. So a lot of the time, the rest of this talk, I'm going to try and make sense of how they make that work, because it's not a case, is it, of just saying, oh, well, we'll get rid of setting then. It's more complex than that. And there are things that they do that make it easier to do that and make it more effective. Right, I've got Bart Simpson on the slide here. I've also got my Zoom bar right over the top of my slides. Does this mean highly individualized teaching? No, it doesn't. And the reason I ask this question and answer it is because that's the obvious answer, isn't it? If I'm saying, well, these systems, they are not setting, they've got mixed ability lessons all the way up to 15 or 16, you might think, oh, right, in that case, they must be doing highly individualized teaching where everyone's doing a slightly different individualized plan. Maybe they're working with computers that computer programs that match questions to their ability, but everyone's working on a different thing and the teacher's walking around the room. No, that's not what they're doing either. They're not differentiating very much by activity. So they have overall the same goals for most students. The differentiation is not through lots of different activities, but rather it's through support. So if you look at the data on this, this is from the Teaching and Learning International Survey. Only England, unfortunately, entered. I haven't got data for Wales or Northern Ireland. But even within lessons, there's not as much differentiation by activity in these international systems. So in England, we were doing that. Teachers were saying that they do differentiation by activity, most lessons or every lesson. 63% of teachers are saying that, compared to an average of 44, Finland on 37, Japan on 22, etc. And that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, this is reasonably old data now, but from 2013, but I was teaching around that time. And back when I was teaching, there was very much an expectation that we would differentiate by activity, to the extent where I was told you can't get an Ofsted outstanding grade if you don't have like mild, medium and spicy worksheets, differentiated worksheets for different ability groups within the classroom. And that's also not what they're doing. So they're not managing mixed attainment classes by setting lower goals for some students based on prior attainment. They have genuinely high expectations for all students. And the way that they support students the way they differentiate is through supporting those students who are going to find it more difficult to access those same goals. I've got Bart Simpson on the slide here. oh no, I'm going to tell you about some Chinese teachers, then I'm going to tell you about Bart Simpson. So just to kind of give you a little anecdote that just illustrates what I mean by this. I had a conversation with 2 different Chinese teachers in Shanghai on 2 separate occasions, both of whom had done international exchange programs, one with England and one with America. So obviously, given my geeky interest in comparative education, I asked them lots of questions about what they thought were the strengths and the weaknesses of the relative systems. And I asked them, what do you think that we can learn from you? What did you not like about the system in England, as well as what did they like? And there was lots that they did like. So this is not a kind of like banging England over the head. We do some really great stuff. But I was asking them what they didn't like or what they think we should change. And both of them, because they're so polite, were very awkward about this question. They didn't really want to tell me. But when I kind of gently said, no, really, like what we need to learn from you as well. Both of them said the same thing. And this is 2 different conversations. And they said this, I'm going to paraphrase now, but they basically said, the thing I found strange is some children were only given much easier work. How are they supposed to keep up with their peers if they're only doing much easier work? And I didn't have an answer for them. It was raised as a question in one instance. And I didn't have an answer because it suddenly dawned on me, we don't expect them to keep up with their peers. We explicitly don't expect them to keep up with their peers, to the extent where if someone comes into secondary school with a lower, back in the day, lower level than some of their peers, we stick a different expected target grade on the front of their books. That's how much we don't expect them to keep up. It's not a case of trying to catch them up. It's a case of, right, well, that's what all you can expect to achieve. So that for me is not high expectations. And that compared to what these systems are doing is not high expectations. At every point within these systems, there's a clear expectation of what is kind of appropriate achievement within a certain year group. And they support the students as much as they possibly can to keep up and to know enough within each year, within each topic, that they are able to access the learning in the following year. So they're bringing along everyone with them. So if it's not highly individualized, what are they doing? So very briefly, and forgive me because I'm trying to talk about pedagogy in 5 countries in about 2 minutes. So this is going to be a big generalization, but just to give you a flavor. So firstly, it's not highly individualized. It's not a case of everyone going off and doing their own projects. Remarkably, it's quite similar. So even though my previous stereotypes or expectations about what I was going to see in Finland versus what I was going to see in Japan were very different. I was expecting that in Finland, it would be highly individualized, lots of student-led learning, children all sitting on the floor, lots of bean bags, to be slightly facetious. And I was expecting in Japan to see teachers standing at the front with some chalk, talking a lot. Now, some of that was true. If you look at these pictures, in Finland, when you first walk in, it does look very different. In Finland, they're all wearing their own clothes. They're calling the teacher by their first name. There's just lots of kind of like slouching around, sitting down in the corridors. It all seems pretty relaxed. In Japan, they're wearing this neat uniform. They do have blackboards and chalk. They're in rows. They bow when the teacher comes in. So at first glance, it looks really different. What was remarkable is actually how similar it was pedagogically in terms of the overall structure of the lesson. So in Finland, in Japan, in Singapore, in Shanghai, typically you would have of a 40 or 50 minute lesson that would be divided into 3 or 4 chunks of 10 to 15 minutes. Some of that would be the teacher explaining from the front of the classroom, but often with lots of questioning. So questioning to the students, questioning from the students. Some of that would be a teacher facilitated whole class discussion. Some of that would be group work, but it would be a case of, right, in your groups for 10 to 15 minutes, I want you to work on this problem. And then at the end of that, one of you is going to come up to the board and show us how you did it. And then we'll have a class discussion about it. So group work, but quite focused. And some of that's going to be independent work, but quite a varied lesson. And that's in contrast to 2 other systems that I've had the privilege to go and spend time in since my original trip, Sweden and Abu Dhabi, where if you look at the data from what the kids are saying is happening, that it is much more individualized, and where they perform lower in PISA, and where it's much more of a case of a teacher coming in and saying, right, we're going to carry on with this project, this lesson, and everyone does their own project for the whole lesson with the teacher walking around. So it looks very different in these high performing systems, but remarkably, there's a lot of commonality amongst those high performers. I've not got a huge amount of time to tell you the other things I'm going to tell you, but so I'll zoom through them and just give you some headlines. Right, how are they making this work? So in terms of what is this? What are they doing? What do these systems have in common? They are comprehensive, with the exception of Singapore. Even within the schools, they are having this mixed attainment approach. They've got high expectations and the same expectations for almost all learners, with obvious, they've got different plans, individualized plans for children who have diagnosed special needs. And it's usually mainly a kind of teacher directed, in the sense of it being the whole class is moving through the curriculum at the same pace, and the lessons divided up into these chunks, rather than everyone going off and working on their own things at their own pace. So that's what they're doing. I'll spend the next 10 minutes talking about some things that they do that make that more achievable as a model. So how on earth do they make it work? So how are they structuring the systems and the schools around high expectations? The first thing is essentially they're taking a mastery approach to learning, a focused curriculum. Some of you may well already be working with mastery-based approaches. But this is a quote from a girl called Sophie, who I met in Canada. So Sophie's actually Chinese. So most of her education in China came over to Canada for sixth form. So she was ideally placed to tell me about the differences between those two countries. For the purposes of this example, Canada does perform highly, but doesn't perform anywhere near as highly as Shanghai. And this, Sophie was seeing this as a bit of a problem, what she's describing as what we're doing in Canada. So she said, the most significant difference I notice is the depth of material covered. In Canada, they do a little bit of everything, and they do it really fast before you really get the essence of that part. And then they jump into something else. Whereas in China, they go on about some knowledge for quite a long time, maybe several weeks, before they move to the next topic. So you get a lot of practice and you really know it. So this is essentially designing curricular content for mastery. So just a few topics studied initially, so that they can be studied in depth. So identifying what's the kind of absolutely essential foundational knowledge within this particular subject and doing that properly. So what that looks like in China, for example, in year 1, they will just focus on number. In mathematics, they won't do any geometry, and they'll just focus on number, which means that it allows for the vast majority of pupils to make progress through the curriculum at the same pace, because everyone's got time to get to at least a basic standard in that content. And then they plan in opportunities for higher attaining pupils to explore the content in more depth. Second thing is that the lessons are all planned really well with great thought, and a lot of time goes into planning every lesson. And now you might immediately think, well, that's totally unrealistic, because one thing that we definitely don't have in the UK is time. But the reason that there's more time spent on each lesson is because they haven't got every teacher planning their own lessons, sitting on the sofas at home, essentially planning the same thing, but from a different sofa. There's a lot more collaboration, which saves teachers time and also means that there's much more sharing of expertise. So the simplest version of this is just weekly timetable planning. So in Finland, Japan, Shanghai, and Singapore, there's at least one period in the timetable for every teacher when they're off, and they're free at the same time as their colleagues who teach the same subject or who teach the same year group, depending if it's primary or secondary. And they'll sit down together just for that one lesson, and they'll just talk through, what are we teaching next week? What resources do we already have? How do we plan? How do we teach this last year? Do we need to change anything? These are resources we have. Actually, it would be good to update this. Right, if you update the PowerPoint, I'll go and find a better video that's going to introduce the topic of evolution, let's say. So the sharing workload, there's some professional dialogue there in terms of like, right, what's the most effective way of teaching this particular topic, and what common misconceptions we might find, for example. More extensive version of that, I won't go into in depth. This is lesson study, so that's less regular. It's maybe once every 6 weeks. And a group of teachers who teach the same subject will come together and just pick one lesson and plan it in great depth. They'll then trial it. So one teacher will teach the lesson and the other teachers will watch. I mean, in these places, they do watch in person. In our context, you could film it and they could watch it back later. But what's really useful about that is the amount of professional learning that happens, because this lesson observation is not like lesson observations as I used to know them. This is an observation in which the teachers are watching the students. They're not watching the teacher, because they know what the teacher's going to do because they jointly plan the lesson. They are watching to see how the students respond to the educational input that they have jointly decided on, which means they can then notice how students react, what they understand, what they don't understand, and change that lesson plan. So you end up with some fantastic professional learning, but also a bank of really well thought through edited lesson plans that teachers can then take and adapt, make their own, change it, ignore it if they want to. But every teacher's got the option of starting from, this is a really good starting point for my planning, rather than starting with a blank piece of paper. Teacher specialization is essentially, it's another way of increasing teacher time and increasing the amount of time spent planning each lesson. This is my timetable from when I was an NQT. So it's not particularly full timetable because I was an NQT. And you can see I'm teaching year 7, year 9, year 10, year 11 and year 12. I'm teaching 5 different year groups, and I'm teaching, but every single lesson there is not repeated. So I'm teaching 18 lessons and I'm planning 18 lessons. This is how I felt. You can imagine there wasn't much time spent on each one, even though I was working till late. This is a timetable of one of the teachers I stayed with in Finland. And you can see that she's only teaching years 7, 8, and 9 in this particular year. And what that means is that although she's teaching 24 lessons, she's actually only planning 6. Because she's specialized in just those year groups. And so a lot of those lessons are repeated, which means she can really make that lesson excellent. It's not what teachers in the UK are used to. But I think because I think the initial reaction is, oh yeah, but that would be boring. But once you're going to get into this, you can see that it's less boring, because it means that you can spend more time actually, depending if you like this kind of thing, I suppose, on the kind of more detailed planning, like really thinking about, right, what are children's common misconceptions in this area? What are some really interesting ways I could try and teach this? Getting into the pedagogical content knowledge, like the theory of teaching, rather than just like doing the bare minimum what you need to do for the next day, because that's all you have time for. They begin with quality resources and build on them. So this very much links to what I was just saying before about those lesson plans, the bank of lesson plans that the teachers have co-planned. They also make use of textbooks, especially in maths and science, but in languages a lot as well. And I think there's maybe a misconception, especially about Finland. There's an idea that Finland is all very progressive and not very traditional at all. And actually, when you look at it, when you go there, when you look at the data, they use textbooks a lot in Finland, but they're really good ones, and the teachers like them and the students like them. And if you ask Finnish teachers about textbooks, they say, well, yeah, they've been designed by really expert teachers. They've been trialed on students. They're designed to be motivating for students. Why wouldn't I use them? And they seem like they respond like it's a strange question to be asking, like, why on earth would I plan everything from scratch when I've got a good textbook to use as the basis for my lesson? So there's not a case. I mean, it is the case for some teachers inevitably, but for most teachers, it's not the case that it's just open the textbook and let's work through it. They plan an interesting lesson, but they use it as a really helpful resource that builds on itself, where that if you're going to work through the textbook, your curriculum in that subject is going to be coherent within that year. And then finally, even if you've done all of these things, so you've got a mastery-based curriculum where you're not trying to cover too much in any one year, you spent a lot of time planning your lessons, really thinking about how you're going to support those students who might find this concept quite difficult initially, what their misconceptions might be, how we might best explain it. You've collaborated with colleagues, you've got all their ideas about the best possible way to teach this lesson. Even if you've done all that, there's still inevitably going to be some students who are still struggling, either because they've missed school or because they just haven't yet got it. And what these systems are doing in that scenario is giving them additional support. But that additional support comes from qualified teachers. So this is Julius on the left here. who I met in Finland, and he's a special teacher. And that doesn't mean that he's a Senko. It doesn't mean that he only works with children with special educational needs, although he does work with children with special educational needs. He works with any children who need a bit of extra support in his particular, this is in middle school, Julius, so I think he was like maths and science. So what teachers will do is, first of all, they will try themselves to support students who are still struggling. They will do everything within their powers to support all students to make progress in their lessons. But if they, you know, we've spent 3 weeks now on fractions, we really need to move on. They will book in one of these special teachers. So, Julius, can you please come on Wednesday morning and work with these 3 kids on this topic while I do an extension activity with the rest of the class? And he will work with those students and make sure that to the best of his ability, and he's got a degree in special educational needs, that he can support those students. It's a similar system in Canada, although fewer of these additional teachers. And in the East Asian systems, it is still extra support from teachers, but it's the class teachers usually rather than extra teachers. And the reason that, well, they offer this additional support all over the place. So obviously within the class, they can offer support between classes because there's a 10-minute break in between every lesson in most of these countries, actually. So at the end of the lesson, it would be quite common for you to see like a child go up to the teacher's desk and ask for their help with a particular question, or the teacher to say, oh, can you wait for a minute? I want to talk to you about something. Sometimes they do that after school. They have like remedial classes essentially after school to help those who are struggling to keep up, or during assembly or first thing in the morning. And they also in East Asia have in I was going to say secondary schools, no, it's primary schools as well. They've got independent study sessions in the afternoon where the students are working on their own thing, but without that much input, which means that they're practicing independent learning for a start. I can't remember what age they start doing this. It's certainly not the youngest ones. But it means that the teachers are able to then pull out children who they want to do some extra work with, who need a bit of extra help, without interrupting their learning in any other lesson. So it's essentially, it's always teachers, which means it's the most qualified people who are tasked with solving the greatest educational challenges. And I'm not referring to a child as a challenge there, but the challenge of teaching this group of students this difficult idea, the thing which the teacher wasn't able to do in the lesson. Too often in the UK, we, having not managed to do something as a qualified teacher, we then expect someone who hasn't got a teaching degree to then manage to solve that problem. So I'm not saying that the solution is get rid of your teaching assistants, but train up your teaching assistants. Make sure that the people who are supporting the students who need the most help are qualified to do so, and are not relying on goodwill alone. And finally, they also they rely on peers as well. So if these qualified teachers will support students, but also students will support students within the class, because these are mixed ability lessons, mixed ability teaching. You've got students who have different levels of attainment within the same class, and they sit them all mixed up. You know, they're not putting them on different tables depending on their prior attainment either. They're all working together. And I'm going to give you a quote because it's quite a nice one from this chap on the left, who's Ilpo Salonen, who's head of education in Espoo, which is in Finland near Helsinki. And I was asking him about this, about differentiation. And he said, I think when you're very talented, I mean, I can't actually see the words because of my toolbar. This is realism. There are more and less talented people. That's just the way of life. We're different, luckily. The thing is, when you're more talented, you learn whatever you do. But in the same time, you learn different things when you have to support someone who hasn't got that kind of talent. And if you're in the same group, sooner or later, you're in that situation where you say, well, don't you see, it works like this and this. And then you have a different level of learning inside your head. In that sense, you learn more and differently. And the less talented student also learns the basic things at least. So I think I was so interested in the way that Ilpo was framing that, because he wasn't even saying this as, oh, well, this is a way to help the lower attainers to keep up. He was saying this is a way to stretch students who have already got it. And you'll all know as teachers that you don't really understand something until you have to explain it to someone who doesn't understand it. And then that way it's benefiting both students, the one who's doing the explaining and the one who is being explained to. And so sometimes this just happens informally. It's just the culture. So in Japan, it's just expected. If you finished your work and someone near you is struggling, that you will help them, not by giving them the answers, but you'll help explain the why behind it. Canada actually make this a formal thing. So they have formal peer tutors, both at secondary level and also primary. So at secondary level, it's actually something that they do in their free periods. They have to apply for a program to be a peer tutor, do a little interview, do some mini teacher training, and then they're assigned to a particular class. So for example, this guy here on the right, he might be particularly good at chemistry, and then he'd be assigned during his free periods to a year 9 chemistry class, where he'd work alongside the teachers to help support those students who are finding things difficult. And as primary, this works also in terms of getting year 6s, for example, and I'm sure many of you do this already, but to get them to hear the reading of year 3 during the break, or work on them, work on a bit of maths with them. And the schools who do this, like, report back that the children love it. You know, both the children who are helping just feel really responsible, really enjoy, you know, being the teacher, and the kids who need the extra help get to hang out with the cool older kids. So it's win-win in that respect as well. But those are a number of different strategies, a number of different school structures essentially that support those schools and support the students to keep up with everyone else, which allow for a system in which there's genuinely high expectations for all students. And we don't do this thing where we think, oh, well, you're coming in at a lower level, this is where you're going to get to. Instead, this is where we want everyone to get to. What can we do to help them reach it? I'm going to stop talking now. So we have a few minutes for questions before the next session. Andrew, would you like to take questions, or are we happy for people to?
Hi, Lucy, it's Fiona. I've just posted Lucy's book information in the chat, and I've just asked if anybody would like to.
Oh, brilliant.
Just to dive in, just to see if there are any questions that come in through the chat just before we let you go.
Lovely.
No, that's great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
So, I mean, just a fabulous, absolutely insightful presentation. Thank you so much. And there's just so much there for us to think about, you know, and just that fundamental, starting with the difference between high hopes and high expectations, and how that moved forward in your presentation was just really, really insightful. Thank you. And always just fascinating and inspirational to hear about education in other countries and how they are so similar and so, you know, sort of so different in many ways. And just that very powerful sentence about the most qualified people who are tasked with solving the greatest educational challenges. So much that we can think about from that in terms of, you know, sort of managing and leading and teaching and learning. So we really do thank you, Lucy. It's been absolutely fabulous to have you with us today.
My pleasure.
And start our event, and we wish you all the best for the research for your next book.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me, Fiona. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. So thank you very much for posting your comments in the chat there, because you know, we will always feed those back to our keynote speakers, and what a great way to start our conference today. So thank you very much. And now I get to have a double pleasure today by introducing Andrew Hammond twice. So I thought that I would say a bit more about him this time, because I felt like he'd heard enough of my voice with the housekeeping. So let me tell you that Andrew Hammond is an experienced school leader, having worked in schools for over 25 years as class teacher, head of English, director of studies, deputy head academic, and head teacher. And he's worked in both the independent and the maintained sectors. Andrew is a prolific author, and he's written over 30 titles for a range of educational and trade publishers. Andrew is currently head teacher at Hall School, Wimbledon, and we hope that he's going to bring lots of his current experience to our day today from that post. And he also serves as education advisor at Discovery Education, who are our sponsors today. Andrew's lead author and series editor also of Discovery Education Pathway. And we're going to hear more specifically about that this afternoon, because you will know from being here at the very start of the day that everybody here today can benefit from a free demo of NAHT Discovery Education Pathway, which is brilliant. So this session is called A Head Teacher's Guide to Keeping Your Head. And once again, I have pleasure in handing over to Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do you know, while you were speaking, I was just measuring the distance from my desk to the window, which is wide open at the moment, to see if I could get there and back before you'd finished speaking to close the window, because in 20 minutes time, it's break time and I didn't manage it. So in 20 minutes time, I might go and close the window. We're keeping it real. We're keeping it real. That was fascinating, wasn't it? Really enjoyed that piece from Lucy. So lots to think about there. So I'm going to share my screen in the good tradition, if I may. I hope you're able to see it now. I hope you can. I hope you can see it. I assume you can. Yep. Great. So I thought we'd just have a quick romp through A Head Teacher's Guide to Keeping Your Head. This isn't a book or anything like that. These are just, and I don't have sort of comparative statistics and data and so forth. I'm afraid this is anecdotal stuff, proudly so, because I'm still doing it. I'm still a head teacher and very much enjoying the challenge. And it is a challenge, and it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. No day is the same, is it? It's never dull, as I often say. I've had a headship in independent school. I've had 2 state school headships. One of a state primary in special measures, which it's never an I, it's we, isn't it? We moved that on very successfully. I was very pleased with that, with a great team. And then a larger state primary school, which I very much enjoyed. And now here I am at a school in Wimbledon, which is a through school, which takes them from young all the way through to big. And many of them, most of them indeed, are considerably taller than I am. So I'm enjoying that challenge. It's great. So I thought I'd just run through, really, first of all, the first few weeks in those different headships that I've had, including the one I'm in. Mindful of my window being open. So I thought we'd have a look at a few problems and see if you recognize any of these. And I feel that in the first week or two, it really has been a bit of a whack-a-mole strategy. I mean, I do enjoy taking on schools that, need a bit of moving on, let's say. I enjoy that. This is a great school, but I think it could be even better. And in terms of organisation, I think there's probably stuff we can be doing. So I'm going to talk to you about whack-a-mole. I'm going to talk to you about crackerjack cabbages. I'm going to show my age there. I'm sure nobody remembers would even be around when crackerjack was on. But if you were, then you'll know what I mean. Pinball wizard, I'm going to talk about... do you have a minute? That famous sentence that tends to come in quite a lot in my day. Do you have a minute? And then, of course, even better than that, did you get my email? Did you get my email? And then we're going to just talk about a rather myopic view that sometimes we can fall into. And then, as always, I try and look at solutions as well. I don't like just having a whinge. I like to look at solutions. So we're going to look at being smart, crossing the Rubicon. And by that, I mean actually delegating, if you can. Find it very hard. Excruciating, actually, delegating, but I think I'm getting better at it. Keep to the map. I'll talk to you about that. Time management, setting expectations and perspective. And it is about 10:11. So here we go. Let's crack on. Well, week one in all the schools that I've taken on, and I've deliberately taken on schools where I feel I can add a bit of value. I enjoy transformational leadership if I can. That sounds a bold boast. It isn't meant to be, but that's the sort of leadership I enjoy, where you feel you're having an impact. And it's a giant logic puzzle, isn't it? And I enjoy that. But I got to say, week one, from a whack-a-mole strategy, and you know what I mean by that, when you're kind of feeling that you're kind of trying to just, lots of things are coming at you, and staff sometimes love nothing better for a new member, a new head, than to come and give you a few problems to solve. And you very quickly become the officer in charge of decisions, the officer in charge of yeses. And that is a straitjacket. But it's not, it wasn't even whack-a-mole in the first week. It was actually who's hidden the mole whacker. It was who's hidden the mole whacker, to be honest, before I can even get to whack-a-mole. The next week, I think, definitely was whack-a-mole. And I became quite good at it. But I became even better in the third week. I think that was sniper. I started to know where some of the problems would come from. So I was ready to tackle them. So I felt I was making some progress. Fourth week, Who's hidden the mole whacker again? I just kind of got that sense that somebody somewhere has removed my ability to sort those problems again, which in itself is a problem. So I don't know whether any of this is ringing true. I'm always going to keep an eye on the chat, because this might literally just be a soliloquy that I'm enjoying and no one else is. But I do hope, oh, there we are. Someone has said ha, so thank you. I hope this is relevant. I'm trying to keep it fun and lighthearted, because I really know how hard this job is. And I'm choosing to do it again because I was missing it. Why do we miss it? Maybe we'll get into that. I don't know why this is. So a few people have recognized the whack-a-mole, and who's hidden the mole whacker again? Just a frustrating thing sometimes. Hopefully that's ringing true. Well, what are we going to do about it? I mean, let's look at solutions rather than just moaning. Well, we manage our own expectations, don't we? And I'm absolute worst one at this. I just think Rome can be built in a day, frankly, if you just work hard enough. And if it's not happening, just work harder. That isn't sustainable. And you're always going to end up in disappointment. It really wasn't built in a day. So manage your expectations as to how much you think you can fix in the first month. It doesn't matter how many things you think need fixing. It was surviving before you arrived, and it will continue to survive for as long as it needs to, while you get everything fixed. So don't be messianic about it. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I'm saying this to myself as anyone else. As I said the other day, actually, on social media, no one is truly replaceable in school. Don't think you are. But to your families, you're properly irreplaceable. And it's worth remembering that. And a messianic attitude, approach at work, unfortunately, it's actually your family and your loved ones that will pick up the pieces there. So I think it's probably worth trying to avoid that sense that you're here to solve everything. And if you think that, well, you deserve the fact that every single day your door will be a revolving door and everybody's coming to you, because you've given the impression that everything needs to come to you. So don't be surprised if you get incredibly busy. Lay tracks for next time. So when you actually go after the moles and you find one and you whack it, lay a track so that you know where it will appear next time. And by which I mean, I'm still old-fashioned enough to be able to use these lovely little, you can't even see it, these little leather-bound diaries. And I'm scribbling in notes all the time. I'm scribbling little notes. And one thing I do at the end of the day, it has to be, I have to say, accompanied by a little glass of red wine, I'll go through my little notes, which are effectively my tracks that I laid for next time the problems appear. Listen, and listen again. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. You have to use them in that proportion. I'm not very good at that. I like talking, but I find getting more out of staff, more from staff, more productivity, just generally a better approach by shutting up and listening a bit more. So that's one for me. Try and make at least one early improvement that you know is going to be a popular one. And I hope and pray that it works. If it doesn't, then you might be in trouble, but that's okay. We can show that we're human. We can show our vulnerability. That's a good thing in leadership. But try and make sure that the first early improvement that you make is a good one and a popular one, and it works. And you can maybe shout about the impact. Worth doing that, I think, actually. And in a few cases, I've done that. One small improvement quite early on in the headship, and it seemed to have been successful. And remember, most importantly, the vision for improving the school that you presented at interview will be about as useful to you as the description of the school that was described to you at interview. In my experience, neither of them are realistic. You have to start again. I don't wish to say that governors or anybody who's appointing you are being disingenuous. They're not. They're presenting to you a vision of what they would like their school to be, just as you are to them. Neither of them are realistic. I always find that. So start again. Start again. Don't go in with expecting to be able to achieve the vision that you presented straight away, because the vision you presented, as I say, is about as realistic as the description that was described to you in the interview. That's my experience anyway. Well, the old crackerjack, I'm racing through this because of time, but back in the 70s and 80s, God, I do sound old. I did enjoy watching crackerjack. And those of you who are old enough to remember will know what it is. And there's this fantastic quiz. I mean, it just seems extraordinary to me now, where we had 3 hapless children in their uniform were actually given prizes to hold, and answer questions. And if they answered the question correctly, they could get another prize as long as they could carry it. But if they answered a question incorrectly, they were given a cabbage, big heavy cabbage, which they also had to hold. And every time you answered a question incorrectly, you were given another cabbage while still valiantly trying to hold on to the precious prizes that you wanted to take home rather than the cabbages. Does this ring any bells? Every day people bring cabbages to me. And there are some times, frankly, when I just say, can you not see I am carrying enough cabbages? Is this a cabbage that you could carry? Is this a cabbage that I actually need? So please try to avoid playing that crackerjack cabbage game. I don't know how many cabbages you think you can carry, but in doing so, you might actually be dropping some of the stuff that you were actually beginning to shift on and do well with. Let's call them the prizes. So don't risk losing some of those prizes, because you need to be attending to those as well. I'm not saying that if anybody throws me a cabbage, I throw it back. I don't. But I do certainly start to say, do you actually need to give me this cabbage right now? And I'm sure everybody would have realized I'm talking about issues, problems, things that require your attention, apparently. So I just want to try and avoid that. Well, how can we avoid that? Well, we have to cross that Rubicon, don't we? We actually have to delegate, which is excruciating for all of us, really. You know, we're chief pot and bottle washer, aren't we? We like this job because we do so many different things, whether it's on gate duty, whether it's U-bend unblocking, frankly, whatever it is, litter picking, we do it all. We do it all. We do it all. If the chef was off, which chef was off the other day, then you're in the kitchen chopping carrots and all that stuff. That's what we do. That's what we do. Bit of variety, but you can't do it all. You can't do it all. If this were a sweet shop, which sometimes it feels like that, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, I don't want to gorge on too many sweets. So delegate, be very clear on the roles and responsibilities and lanes, really clear, but you then have to discuss what happens in between the lanes. And in my experience, it's in between the lanes that problems seem to appear. And if you are so hell-bent on making sure everybody's very clear of their roles and responsibilities, then you are risking balls being dropped in between, because it's nobody's actual job. And that's the collective responsibility bit. That's that shared collective pride, really, in how our school is doing. And I've always been fascinated by that, the culture of the school, how we can kind of just get that collective responsibility going. And that's a whole day's inset, isn't it? Know your own strengths. Don't be the buckaroo pony. Don't be that pony that just has more and more piled on, because at some stage you will kick. You will kick. So just be aware that if you actually are already carrying too many things on in your saddlebags, then it's worth just pausing and saying, I genuinely am unable to attend to this right now. And we'll come on to this later about how you phrase that. But does that ring any bells? Are you the buckaroo pony? Are you trying to take on too much? We really, really, really are only human. And we can only do the improbable. The impossible, I think, eludes us. So at least it eludes me just now. Does that ring any bells? What about pinball leadership? Are you a pinball? I've certainly been a pinball in some of the schools. Part of me finds that quite thrilling, actually, because of the variety and the unpredictable nature of school issues and challenges. But whether it's age, I suspect it probably is, or anything else, I'm beginning to think, you know, I'd quite like to just have a nice, clear course rather than ricocheted sort of leadership. So it's just, again, it's the whack-a-mole, isn't it? Just preempting where you think issues are going to happen. I mean, literally, since my welcome to you this morning and this piece, 3 staff have gone home with COVID. And I have a raging headache. I really do, actually. I've just dosed up with paracetamols and Nurofen. Don't know whether you're supposed to take them both. So things happen, don't they? But there are still things that are predictable, that are planned, and try and stick to those as much as possible. But let's look into some other solutions for that pinball leadership. Well, you set the agenda because you're the head. You set the agenda. And time after time, I do feel that in all the schools I've worked in, less so here, this is a terrific place, but it has its challenges in terms of who's setting the agenda. Well, I set the agenda because I'm the head. And we follow my map, which is the management action plan. Now, you probably have school development plans, school improvement plans. We all have a SEF. I think that's obviously an important summary sort of snapshot. It's not necessarily my working document. That's my summary that I keep updating. But my working document is definitely my map. I call it a map, which is my management action plan, which everyone on the SLT owns and really owns. And we actually have columns to show who owns what. And the sections on the left are simply taken directly from the Ofsted handbook. We are Ofsteded, and we take it from the framework. That's the cheat sheet. That's the script. So we might as well use it. And then, wait, I'm not going to tell you how to do a map, but you'll have your own. But, you know, do stick to your map. And every single Monday night with SLT, we will go back and we'll update the map. It's a digital document rather than obviously a paper one. I can't stand paper ones. We all have it on Google on the Drive, and we upload evidence all the time. In the right-hand side, we have the commentary and different colors for different people. And when everybody's updated it in the commentary, there's always a little link to the shared doc on Google Drive for that particular policy that's been updated, or that particular template that's been reframed, or that particular scheme of work that's been done. And everything is in there. And I set the agenda for that. But I do think collective responsibility is everything if we can. It's that really odd balance, isn't it, between a benevolent dictatorship and a democratic organization. But open the floodgates of democracy on everything and you'll never make a decision. So that sounds a bit harsh. But I think for the sake of everybody, we do need a decision maker. And I try my hardest to make a decision quickly on the bigger things. But on the other hand, a bit of distributed leadership to empower others to make decisions is great. Well, there's that great phrase, isn't it? Do you have a minute? Does anyone else hear that? Do tell me if you do. I hope you're still there. The chat's died, but I hope you're still there. Yeah, I mean, it's just something that is said to me regularly in corridors and classrooms and in the office with the revolving door that I have. Do you have a minute? And being of good nature, I think that's why we go into this. It would be an odd thing to go into if we didn't have a good nature. I will always say yes. Yes. And I haven't got a minute. I literally haven't got a minute, and especially not now. But I'll say, yeah, of course. Yeah, come in. Someone says every day. I hear it all the time and sometimes find it hard to say no. Yeah, I agree. I feel like I need a ticket machine outside my door, and sometimes people queue down the corridor. That reminds me of the delicatessen section or the butcher section in Sainsbury's years ago. You have to have a ticket, didn't you? Yeah, I know. Well, let's come up with some solutions, because I don't know about you, but it's doing my head in. It really is a bit. So what I would say, it seems like it's died. There we are. Look, I can give you 2 minutes now, or I can give you 15 minutes at 4:15. You choose. But I'm not giving you any more than 2 minutes. Invariably, people will take the 2 minutes now and they'll stretch it out to 10. I'll give you 2 minutes now. I learned this one from Andrew Jeffrey, actually. Brilliant man. One of the course leaders on the Pathway course. There's many different courses, and he did one of the courses on time management and self-organizational skills, neither of which I have. I don't have time for. But yeah, he said, look, I can give you 2 minutes now or 15 minutes later. You choose. It's an interesting one. You could try it. Send your thoughts in an email and I will respond tomorrow. And sometimes they're not actually bothered to actually write the email, in which case it might not have been quite as important as they said. If it was, they would send you an email. I don't like having lots of emails. I prefer to do everything face-to-face, but sometimes it's worth just giving them time to reflect, craft an email, and I will look at it tomorrow. I'm not going to look at it tonight. I will look at it tomorrow, because I'm looking at the other 130 emails tonight. This will be the 131st. So I'll look at that one tomorrow, but I will look at it tomorrow. Give me 24 hours. But, how will the children benefit is usually my metric, and give me 24 hours. And a corridor conversation, you're not always going to give it your best attention, and that's what they want. So I would push back and say, send your thoughts in an email, and I'll certainly keep an eye on that. I'm really sorry, I don't have a minute at the moment. Are you brave enough just simply to say that? No, I don't. You asked me, do I have a minute? And I don't. I've actually just used 20 seconds telling you that. I'm really sorry, but I don't. I haven't been brave enough to say it yet. So I just take on a cabbage and another cabbage and another cabbage. I'd love to be able to say I'm carrying too many at the moment. Yes, someone says, yes, I always say, if you need more time, can we chat later? A lot of people then realize that they can maybe send an email or they can deal with it themselves. Oh, I love that. That would be great if they could do that. Is this, or maybe if I was really brave, I'd say, is this actually one for me? Or could someone else help first? That would be a good thing to ask. Is this actually for me, this one? Or could someone else help? And then that brilliant phrase. Did you get my email? Did you get my email? Very often I'll have emails from colleagues, not here, not in my current school, of course, previous schools, at 10, half 10, 11 o'clock at night. And of course, we're still on, which we shouldn't be, but we are. We really shouldn't be. And then the next morning, bright and early, 7 o'clock in the office here, knock, knock. Well, my door's always open, so they come in. Did you get my email? Well, given the fact that you sent it at 11 o'clock last night and it's only 7 a.m., is your question presumably implying why I haven't replied to it? So I think we probably do need to have a bit of a curfew, not a curfew necessarily, we're all grown-ups, but some sort of protocol, because it does frustrate me when people send an email late at night and then come in the next morning, did you get it? So I think managing their expectations, how we do it, some schools do have a curfew beyond 7 o'clock in the evening, it just isn't necessary. But people have thoughts and they instantly want to share them, particularly if it's an issue that they found and they instantly want to give it to you. That's invariably what tends to happen. Oh, I've suddenly thought something's going to happen tomorrow. The wheels are going to fall off. I'll tell Andrew. Then I don't need to think about it. Great. That's a bit unfair. But yeah, I think maybe they could just maybe email it and set it to an auto email so that it arrives tomorrow morning. I mean, that way I know we all get hundreds of emails at 7 a.m. because that's when everybody's set the time. But even so, I just think that might be better sometimes than if you want to have a thought and you want to immediately send it, just put it in your draft box. Perhaps, I don't know. I'd love to know how people deal with email because it's my enemy at the moment. CCs are just not always required. I seem to be copied into many, many, many emails. I don't know why. I mean, it's lovely. Maybe they want me to know that they're working at 9 p.m. I'm not impressed if they are. Why can't you manage your time during the day? Well, because you're teaching during the day. I don't know. Don't know what the answer is to that. But I don't need to be copied into quite so many. I tried to start sorting out folders. I did it on my first week. In every headship I've done it. I've created email folders, and 3 weeks in, never had the time to sort and triage it into the different folders. If anybody has any ideas about that, please let me know. But that would be a good way of doing it, just to sort out those that are urgent, those that are important, those that are important but not urgent, and preferably those that are not important and not urgent. But be careful of those because they will soon creep up the list. If it's important and urgent, well, frankly, perhaps don't put it in an email. I've had a few instances recently where people have put something in an email to me during the day, and it was regarding something that required my immediate attention, and it really did, but it was in an email. And I don't know about you, I tend to read emails probably 7, 8 p.m. and then I'll go on till goodness knows when, just plowing through the day's emails. I possibly during the day to do that. So if you're going to send me something that's really urgent, you do need to actually interrupt me and come and tell me. But maybe that's me. I think there's a problem with that. If I'm not getting any time at all during the day to look at any emails because I'm back to back meetings, then thin out my diary. It's my diary. It is my diary. Gosh, are we over time? No, I think we've got a bit more time. I wanted to just finish by talking about myopia and our myopic view. What I mean by that is I think sometimes we can be quite blinkered. I think we can only see the faults. We can only see the issues. We never let the compliments stick. We never actually sort of pause climbing for a minute, turn around and admire the view. Very few of us do that. Certainly I don't do that. And it becomes quite myopic, actually, quite sort of blinkered in terms of the progress that we are actually truly making. If we're only focusing on the bits that need our attention and the issues, we're going to very quickly forget to look in the rearview mirror as to what we've actually achieved. And so do you have a to-do list and a ta-da list, or just a to-do list? I've started to do a ta-da list as well. To-do lists and done lists. Please don't forget the ta-da list. It's really important, really important. And I actually shared my ta-da list. I do it's a fortnightly virtual coffee catch-up with parents, and just an opportunity for people to jump on, and I'll just say hello. It's lovely. It's nice. And I share my to-do list, which they like, and it's useful. And then I have lots of feedback for my to-do list for next time. And it's always a popular thing to do, and I really enjoy it. And it makes me feel, actually, Hammond, you're not completely useless at this. You thought you were, but you're not actually. You're actually not bad at it. But unfortunately, we tend to punish ourselves a little bit that our to-do list is so long. Well, let's make a to-do list then, and do let the compliments stick. Do you have a happy file? Some people do. Do you have a ring binder with all your nice letters and cards in? Or do you just bung them in a drawer somewhere and never look at them? I suggest you put them in a folder. I haven't yet. I'm not talking about building a shrine to yourself, but I am suggesting that a ring binder with lots of little punch pockets in, where you can put all those lovely cards and letters that you get, even a really, really lovely email, which you might occasionally get. It might be worth actually just popping that in your ring binder and just having a look at it occasionally to remind yourself how it's gone. Stop catastrophizing all the time. We do that all the time. Why? Is it? I think it seems to be a default setting for many of us. It seems to be almost like a design fault that maybe all of us seem to share. We tend to spin downwards. We don't tend to spin up when something's gone tremendously well. I don't ever remember going home having had, I don't know, one positive meeting. I mean, I'll settle for one really positive meeting, and then spending the entire evening spinning upwards thinking, this is going absolutely brilliantly because of that meeting. And yet if I have one negative, I usually have more, where I've felt that hasn't really gone well, I'd like to have achieved a better outcome sooner. So I'm not pleased. I will catastrophize about that all evening. And I think that's really unfair. I don't think we should be doing that. So let's try and, I don't know what I'm sure somebody can tell me in the chat what the opposite of catastrophizing is, but perhaps we should do that a little bit more. We should actually try and actually spin up a little bit and do see the school through another's eyes. I do think that's worth doing, actually, whether it is showing prospective parents around, which is, let's face it, a lovely part of our job, isn't it? Showing families around. I love doing that. You can get to see the school through different eyes. Shadowing one of the children, being one of the children, one of the year groups, optimizing. Thank you, Jen. Absolutely, we should be optimizing. Yeah, I think that's a nice thing to do, to actually see the school through another's eyes, and we should do that more often, actually. And some final thoughts. Well, look, you can't do a good job if your job is all you do. You really can't. You really can't. So don't try. And I tried, and I found eventually that it wasn't worth the sacrifice of the rest of my, my life, really, I suppose, in terms of hobbies and things and interests and friends and social life and family. Oh yes, family. I have a wife and 4 children. Forgot. All those things are really important. So you really can't do a good job if your job is all you do. I said in the opening remark, didn't I, this morning, that it's not just our leadership, organizational skills, managerial skills, our efficiency, our mettle that is valuable to the school. It's actually our quirky character, our joie de vivre, and our love, literally our love of life. And we need to model that as well. So I'm a proud drummer. That's my thing. Everybody needs a thing. I don't know what your thing is. I've been drumming since I was 10, so that's 40 years. I enjoy that. And I enjoy gardening. And I enjoy writing stories. What's your thing? You need to have a thing. And if you've neglected it for so long, do dare this half term to start again. Because I do think we're supposed to be modeling that, aren't we, really? And you're not an imposter. Everyone else is feeling the same. So you can't be an imposter because everyone else feels that they are as well. I've been doing this a long time. All the head teachers I speak to, quietly, maybe at a bar somewhere, actually say, I still feel a bit of an imposter here. I feel like I'm faking it. Everybody feels the same. Everybody feels the same. So just literally finally, and I've got 5 minutes according to my watch, just a couple of little routines that I do that help me stay a person, a professional and a school leader, because I think if we get the person bit right, that spreads into your professional life. And I think that spreads into your school. I don't have work-life balance. It's just my life. I'm an educator. Don't talk to me about work-life balance. It's my life. It's my life. And I want to try and sort of hope that it's anchored. And there are routines there that anchor me. It's my porridge bowl. Proud of this. Tesco's, £5. The little espresso cup was actually about 20, I've got to say, on Amazon. I look forward to that every morning. I get the right porridge, which for me is Flaherman's. And I've been through lots of different porridges. I go with that. 5 o'clock every morning, I'm on the row machine. I'm doing my press ups. They seem to be diminishing a little bit. I think I'm getting weaker. Never mind. But I then, 5:30, I'm at the stove stirring the porridge. Not microwave. We've got to be proper stuff. I'm not actually counting the number of porridge stirs yet. I'm not quite so obsessive. But I do feel that's a routine that anchors me. And no matter what cabbages are thrown at me today, and there will be some, I've already had 3, I know that at 5:30 tomorrow morning I'm stirring my porridge. I am. That's a certainty, and I need certainty in my life. And I don't judge me. I don't know what your lunch is. Please don't judge me. I don't know what your lunch is. But in a previous state school I was running, I bought a big soup in every day and a Freddy Frog, and I had a lovely cup of peppermint tea. Wasn't always at lunchtime, 3:30, 4 o'clock, God knows when it was. But I still had 20 minutes. And if you say, well, I don't even have 20 minutes, I'm urging you to do that, because the cemeteries are full of martyrs. Sorry to put it in blunt terms. Please give yourself 20 minutes to have your lunch. And when I left that particular school, I was given a giant hamper with lots of tissue paper in it, and I pulled it all out. crepe paper, and they'd bought me 5 tins of Big Soup, 5 Freddy Frogs, and 5 boxes of peppermint tea. They'd noticed, and I thought that was sweet and lovely. Get on the exercise. Rowing machine, worth doing. Healthy mind, healthy body. We know that, really is. Drink. I think that's a really important thing to be doing, is to be drinking as much as you possibly can. And maybe the odd glass of water too. I do think that's important. It really is. And I neglect it to my peril. So I have a huge crate of 12 of these, which I put in the office every Sunday. I live in Suffolk. I come down on a Sunday. It's not ideal, but there we are. And I go back on a Friday night. And so on a Sunday afternoon, when I come down, I have 12 of these bottles, and you've got to drink them. You really have. Last minute or two. I like growth. I like things to grow. That's why I'm in this job. I like creativity. I like newness. I like things to be growing. That's what education's about. We say it's about attainment and progress. I think it's about growth. And I like things to be growing. And when things are not growing as quickly as I'd like them to, well, I buy another plant. And it scratches that itch. It's terrific. My office is now absolutely covered in plants, which is a clear sign that things are not growing as quickly as I'd like them to. So I get another plant and I nurture it, and I really look after my plants, and they grow more quickly than other things grow. So it's worth doing. Get your litter picker. That's the best one I've found. Find the Rolls Royce of litter pickers on Amazon and treat yourself. This was about 20 quid, this one. Well, it's a real beauty. It's got a nice action on it. Really nice action. And I do that every day. And that's my time to go out. And it looks good and be, oh, he cares about his school. Actually, I just want 5 minutes on my own in the playground. So I'll just pick up a litter picker and go litter picking. I would suggest you do that. I've mentioned that a few times at conferences, and a lot of people have actually gone and got litter pickers. I need to get shares in a litter picker, but I do think it's worth doing. How much would you spend on a litter picker? These are the questions we should be debating. So I'd love to hear. Maybe we'll do a survey. I'd spend as much as 20 quid. I really would, actually, because it's my friend. It really is. So take the litter picker for a walk. Shocking, yes, quite. And then finally, sleep. When we go into London, when we go to work, when we go out for the day and we take our mobile phones, we forget sometimes to take our chargers. Not our charges, we forget to take our kids. We forget to take our chargers. And I don't know about you, but I'm always looking at the little charging level on the top right-hand corner of the phone all day. Oh God, I didn't bring my charger. But we never do that for ourselves. We never do that for ourselves, or I don't. I never check my own levels. My charging unit is my bed. David Gumbrell told me that when he was doing a brilliant course for Pathway. Your charging unit is your bed, and you have to be on it. Sleeping. You have to be on it. Sufficient time to charge your batteries. You cannot charm your way out of that, fake your way out of that. You have to be sleeping. So I would strongly urge you, if you can, to go through those little routines which enable you to switch off. You have to get up early in this job. We know we do. But see if you can actually get into bed and sleep and have some quality sleep. Whatever works. With me, red wine. Right, on that note, I'm going to hand back to Fiona. I hope that was useful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Felicity. I hope that was useful for you.
Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely fantastic. If we could give you a big virtual round of applause, I can feel that in this space. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, apart from all the 80s, are they 80s? Cracker Jack and cabbages, I think there must be. And don't be the buckaroo pony, just brilliant. So yeah, fantastic. We don't really have to explain Cracker Jack and cabbages, but seriously, what amazing solutions, manage your own expectations, don't be messianic. Yeah. Lay tracks for next time when we're going for that whack-a-mole, and of course listen, and the best one I think is just making that one early improvement, which is
I agree,
really meaningful. So I didn't know you were a drummer, I'll be honest.
Love it.
Or a gardener. I did know you told stories, but obviously can't combine all three of the habits at the same time. But brilliant. So time for you now, Andrew, to close your window, because you're still up, and maybe take some more Nurofen, because you're up, of course, this afternoon. So if you don't need any more reasons to enjoy your free trial of Pathway today, we've just seen it in the last 30 minutes with Andrew Hammond. So we'll let Andrew disappear now. And of course, he will be back this afternoon doing his session just before our conference closed. So we've got one more keynote before our morning break. So it's now my absolute pleasure and privilege to introduce you to Mel Stanley. Welcome, Mel. Mel is a personal brand specialist working exclusively with professionals who want to develop their leadership presence. Mel has 25 years experience as a C-suite marketeer in a large UK network agencies and blue chip corporates. Mel secured her first of 2 advertising agency board positions, aged 33. And she finished as a non-exec director of Smart Energy GB, a division of Ofgem, before she left her corporate career behind in September 19 and set up her own personal brand consultancy. As part of this consultancy, and you may have seen her on LinkedIn and various other social media, Mel offers a range of private and team coaching, focusing on how current and future leaders can build trust and establish their credibility amongst their stakeholder audience. So we're delighted to have Mel with us today, a completely different perspective for our new head teachers and our new school leaders. Mel, it's an absolute delight. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Yes, I'm not on mute anymore. That's fine. Well, hello, everyone. Yes, I'm the commercial speaker. So I'm going to start by saying hands up. Apart from having been through the education system, I left it behind when I graduated and don't know too much about it. But that's probably going to be hopefully the interesting part of this keynote, because I'm going to be very objective about it, and I'm going to talk about leadership and brand building from a commercial perspective. And there are a lot of parallels in the development of personal branding in commercial life, in the business world, as much as there are in education and in teaching, and indeed any other sector. So I'm going to speak for about 25 to 30 minutes. I think there might be some questions at the end. Predominantly, as I say, about personal branding, and it's a subject that some of you may have heard of, and if you have, I'm going to ask you to park any preconceptions you might have, particularly if they're negative, because personal branding, whether you're a current or a future leader, and having a personal brand is an integral and essential career development tool. So, as Fiona said, prior to starting my own company and getting into personal branding, I worked with some of the UK's best known commercial brands, such as O2, BT, British Gas, Lloyds Bank and Barclays. And yes, I finished my career as marketing director at EDF Energy. That's another story. But during those 25 years, I actively built and promoted these brands without giving a second thought to my own personal brand. When I talked to clients about their brand values, their mission and their purpose, what they wanted their brand to stand for and how to best promote it, I didn't apply any of these criteria to myself. And yet, unbeknownst to me, my own brand was being established and latterly reinforced. And that's a truism. That's the truth for all of us. Your personal brand is being created or entrenched by everything you say and you do, whether you recognize it or not. Every email, every meeting, every phone call, how you treat your colleagues and your peers, your decisions and your actions all go towards your brand. Because consciously or subconsciously, we make judgments, people make judgments about others in a nanosecond. It might be friends, colleagues, family even, and we quickly form impressions as a result. And when you're at school, your personal brand will be exposed when you walk the corridors, meet the parents, sit on the board of governors, run assemblies. It'll manifest itself through your leadership in multiple ways and be exemplified in the culture and the behaviours that you define. So it'll be very visible, both personally through you and in the assets of the school. And therefore, has the potential to define the reputation of the school. Your personal brand and the brand of the school are one. So to present our best selves to our audiences, we have to be very clear on what we want those stakeholders to think about us, what opinion we want them to form. Otherwise, the danger is we allow others to define us by association. So having a personal brand allows you to manage your message. and positively influence the perception others have of you, just like a commercial brand. So today I'm going to talk about 4 things. What a personal brand is and what it isn't, and hopefully bust some myths. How your personal brand and reputation act as one to establish trust and credibility. The benefits of a personal brand, and how to develop some leadership behaviours alongside the foundation elements of your brand. So we'll start off with what it is and what it isn't. If you Google personal brand, you'll find a gazillion results. The wiki description talks about it being the conscious and intentional effort to create and influence public perception with a means to elevating their credibility, differentiation. Ultimately, it's about career advancement. And that's true, but it also sounds a little bit self-serving, right? But when you relate it back to business as a strategy, as a personal strategy that can help others, it becomes less so. And personal branding is simply a strategic process that originated in business. It's the one I did for 25 years, and now it's been adapted to individuals. So in creating a personal brand, we apply exactly the same thinking, the principles and the methodologies as we would to a corporate brand or product. Personal branding develops a mark around your name and your career. And you use this mark to communicate your expertise, your personality, and your values. So if you think now about Nike or Apple or Samsung, the names conjure up associations, positive and negative, and that's branding. Apple and Samsung are actually perfect examples of branding at work in that space. Mobile phone experts would say that Samsung is functionally the superior phone, Android's a better operating system, but people pay more for Apple. They queue around the corner when there's a launch. They'll pay nearly £1,000 or more for the next upgrade because they associate the brand with simplicity, innovation, and creativity, not following the pack. And Apple advocates want to relate to these values. They see the brand as a reflection of them. So when Apple launched iMac, they deliberately set out to cause division with Microsoft. Are you a PC or a Mac person? They invited people to side. They wanted the Mac to be cutting edge and creative. These are the words they wanted associated with their brand. So if you think of those principles and some very well-known personal brands, Kim Kardashian, like or loathe her, I personally loathe her, but she's made millions from her personal brand. She doesn't need to advertise her products. She sells them direct off her Instagram account to millions of followers. Her followers feel they know her and the family, though they've never met them. So when she says buy a lipstick, they buy a lipstick. Richard Branson, what springs to mind? Daredevil explorer, innovator, space pioneer, business mogul, but one who cares, right? The David of David and Goliath. Arguably, he's also a billionaire with a dodgy tax record and a private island who'd rather spend his money on going into space. But his brand is so positive, that's glossed over. His personal brand gives him resilience. And politicians, we love them. When people vote on people, not policies, they're responding to a personal brand, the perception they have of that person, and therefore what they stand for. Again, despite having no personal knowledge to speak of. Apple was headed by Steve Jobs, a man with an emphatic personal brand. Jobs' personality, his values and his drive was imbued in that brand. And this is where your personal brand and professional reputation and those of your school begin to fuse. Your brand can influence the direction and the culture of your school in exactly the same way as the personalities of Jobs and Branson are instilled in their commercial brands. So it's not just the domain of entrepreneurs and job seekers and Instagram influencers. It helps all of us establish credibility and trust as a leader, regardless of the sector. And gaining a reputation as an effective, authentic leader requires long-term vision and frontline execution. It's about what you say about yourself. Your reputation is what others say about you, and that's the link. And it's easy to suppose that leadership is a quirk of personality. You've got it or you haven't. But harnessing and leveraging these qualities is a fundamental skill if you're to be recognised as a leader, whether you're a natural or not. And that's where your brand comes into play. Your brand, that to which you aspire, should guide you into the future. It's about who you are, it's about your vision, a reflection of your deepest values. And it helps people, including you, define who you are and assess your anticipated value and contribution. It gives focus to your actions and clarity. Because without a clear and well communicated brand, others may be unaware of your capabilities, and they may misjudge you by association. So whilst personal branding might appear manipulative, self-serving, narcissistic even, to be fair, some people use it that way. Personal branding done well is about presenting the most authentic version of you based on who you are, your strengths and your character, what you're recognised for. And as I said, you already have one, either by design or default. You just may not know it. Have you ever been told you're a firm but fair leader? Do you see yourself as a change agent? Do you love to innovate and try out new things for the greater good? Or are you more comfortable as a consolidator with a reputation for continuous improvement? These are all brands. These are all branding associations. And your reputation precedes you is only a bonus if it's a good reputation. So if the associations and features being attributed to you, if it's happening anyway, isn't it better to manage your brand and make it work for you? Because cultivating it has so many benefits. Having a brand is the more proactive way to work and lead in ways that are authentic. So it's not about what everybody else thinks. It's not about the expectations of others. It's about you being known as a trusted quantity. And leadership is all about trust. And authenticity, it's bandied around a lot as a word. I think of it as the practice of letting go who you think you are supposed to be, and instead embracing who you actually are. And you need to do some self-awareness work to find that, which we'll come on to. And being visible, visibility accounts for about 60% of success. So your personal brand allows you to stand out, demonstrates your vision, showcases your talents, stretches your competencies. And this builds respect and trust from your audiences, the children who essentially are end users, the parents who are your stakeholders, the governors or trustees who would be a board of directors in the commercial world. And brand awareness in the commercial world sits at the top of the tree. If consumers don't know who you are and what you do, why would they trust you sufficiently to buy your product? It's exactly the same for people. Being visible, being seen to make your mark is a huge part of becoming trusted as a leader. And when you have a brand, you can differentiate yourself. A clear leadership brand tells people what to expect from you versus others. Maybe you're uniquely able to organize complex projects or mediate disagreements or develop teams. Just like Branson and Jobs, when people think about your brand, those talents will immediately come to mind. So it gives you something to own, something that's unique, and it stands you apart from everybody else. And that's important because then you get recognized for your distinct contribution. Andrew was talking just then, I caught the end of it, about imposter syndrome. We all suffer from it. Having a personal brand gives you confidence, and confidence is the most powerful brand attribute. It overcomes almost everything, but it only comes from knowing who you are and that you're valued and respected for it. Confidence is the ultimate empowerer, and it kicks imposter syndrome into the bin because it builds resilience. And when you're a known quantity, like Richard Branson, it means you can weather mistakes more easily. You're more likely to be given the benefit of the doubt. You know, if you've ever heard the phrase, that's not like her or him, he or she is acting out of character. Character in that context is brand. You're allowed a bad day. And finally, it'll help you broaden your impact. Your brand reflects the work you get done, but also how you interact and relate to others, how you work effectively with others. Do you build and sustain partnerships? The way you engage in the social process of leadership creates a personal brand that makes you more memorable and more talked about. And that future-proofs you for if you want to go on to do something else. You can quite easily move, as I did, flip between schools, between sectors. And this is important because, you know, with head teachers, you own the institutional ethos. Your agenda, your purpose, your values, all part of your brand, and your existing reputation will shape the culture of the school that you lead. So you have to have clarity on what you want to be known for as a head teacher and as a leader. What do you stand for? How will you configure your leadership brand around the school brand? Or will you want to reposition it? What are your values? How will they align with your conduct and governance? What are your stakeholders saying about you now, and how do you find that out? Because your assessment could differ from the reality, and you need both perspectives to really understand and dig into your brand. In the commercial world, there are personal development plans or PDRs, formal 360s, ongoing anecdotal feedback loops. But for teachers, you might want to consider your allies. You know, who are your eyes and ears in the staff room? Who's your trusted confidant who will share the good and the bad and give you an honest appraisal? What are the children saying about you? So, you know, there's an opportunity for non-filtered feedback. So talking about leadership behaviors and the foundation elements of your brand is one thing, but, you know, how do you start to even do it? Taking the time to define and improve your traits as part of your brand. Yes, it'll elevate you in the eyes of your team. It'll give you confidence, but what makes a great leader and a great leadership brand? So Indra Nooyi, who was the former chair of PepsiCo, said that leadership is very hard to define, but if you can get people to follow you to the ends of the earth, you're a great leader. So start by considering what your team needs to know about you in order to follow you. There's a very simple exercise I use in my private coaching session, which is about answering the question, why would anyone follow you? Because in asking this and answering it honestly, it enables you to really boil down your key leadership traits and what you want your brand to stand for as a leader. And it's very simple. You just write down 4 or 5 reasons that you think your team will follow you, reduce it to the top 2, and those become your focus. If you want to take it one step further, video yourself speaking this until you have a statement, because that becomes your filter for everything that you say and do. And that makes you consistent. And branding is all about consistency. And to lead your team in the right direction, you need a vision, crystal clear vision of where you're headed. Your team will be much more engaged and effective if they also buy into that vision and they can see a forward-looking mentality. And consistency, as I said, walk the walk. Execution and delivering on promises is absolutely key. In leadership, people are judged by their actions, not what they do. It's not what they say, it's what they do. And it's the same for commercial brands. So the way you behave on a daily basis, no matter how insignificant that interaction might seem to you, as I say, the phone call or the email, the conversation in the corridor, it will all help your brand over time. So meeting deadlines, communicating effectively, putting in the extra effort, all convey fundamental brand traits for leadership. One of the classic mistakes of leadership is to think you have to have all the answers, and actually you don't. You know, great leaders have humility. They have the self-awareness to recognize that you don't need to know everything. There's way more to learn. You won't be top of the class in all areas. Fallibility, vulnerability, being able to stop are all marks of an authentic leader, and ultimately the way to gain trust and respect. So, you know, strong brand is imperative to anyone's success, but for leaders, the required brand traits include that special combination of humility and self-awareness, as well as being able to plan, execute, and motivate, and inspire confidence. It's a big ask. But branding isn't rocket science. It's an exercise in self-awareness, knowing who you are and behaving accordingly. And strong brands are rooted in honesty and in reality. So you have to be very honest with yourself when developing your brand, and sometimes quite brutal. To start with, think about your values. I've mentioned values a few times. These are the things that you won't compromise on. We all have professional values, but we have personal ones as well. These are the principles that guide our internal conduct, the things that are so fundamentally important to us that we won't compromise on them. Your moral compass, if you like, how you decide what's right and wrong, what's acceptable, what isn't. Is there anything that causes your blood to boil? Any really strongly held beliefs? These are the deep values and principles that come from within. So I have a massive issue with courtesy, or rather lack of it. It drives me mad when people let the door swing in my face, or, you know, when you're parked and you're waiting for traffic to come through and somebody pushes in. That drives me mad, you know, and they don't say thank you. So it's about respect, and that's one of my values, and courtesy. So sometimes it's actually easier to work out your values through what makes you mad, because we're human, you know, we tend to focus sometimes on the negative. So use reverse psychology. What behaviors do you see in others that you find unacceptable or would never do yourself? And then hold up a mirror to that, flip it over, and the chances are you'll have a couple of values of your own. So honesty, loyalty, acceptance, equality, humility, commitment are all values. As distinct from drivers, the second foundation element. So drivers fall out of your purpose, your goals, and your objectives as a leader. What do you want to achieve? These are the things that motivate you to get out of bed in the morning, to things that make you want to succeed, that give you a sense of satisfaction. The things that need to be in place for you to feel fulfilled and happiest. And happy, you know, joy, Andrew was mentioning it, joy is much underrated. You know, we want to be able to enjoy our lives and what we do. We dedicate so much time to work. Enjoyment is key. So to work out your drivers, think of some really great achievements and what made you proud of them, and why you were proud of them, and what was in place to make that happen. And be very specific, because it's easy to say, oh, well, I'm motivated by this or that, but dig down. You know, I think one of my greatest achievements actually was leaving the corporate world after 25 years and starting my own business 4 months before COVID, as it turns out. And I've always gravitated towards being self-employed and doing my own thing, but I didn't really recognize it as a driver, because ultimately when things went wrong, I used to bolt to corporate environments that were more secure. And so I have an interesting mix in my drivers about autonomy and doing my own thing, but also security. So when I decided to do this, I had a 10-year plan in place that would enable me to do it. So that I didn't have to go back into full-time work, even at the height of COVID. So my drivers were about not being micromanaged, and having autonomy and responsibility and ownership. And you know, you might feel the same. Leaders often have these kind of feelings. That's why we become leaders. But recognition, camaraderie, autonomy, taking risks, those are all drivers. Working with people who inspire you, continually learning is also important. And then finally, you know, strengths. What are your authentic strengths, your gifts and your talents? Those are the things that you can leverage and carve out your point of difference. And it's very easy to say, I'm accessible, I'm approachable, I'm kind, I'm fair but firm. And they're strengths, but you know, you have to dig into what these strengths are and what they really entail. For example, being firm but fair is about setting clear boundaries, treating everyone the same, consistency in approach. Those are the kind of reputational words that you want to be associated with you and your brand, alongside your purpose, you know, your why. Do you have a higher order purpose? I'm sure you must have. Coming into teaching is all about purpose, and purpose outlives external drivers. But we get very fixated on how we do the role, how we're good at doing it, how confident we are in doing it, rather than why we do it. And that's really important, because, you know, having a purpose, whether that's making a difference to young lives or doing something that provides equal opportunities for others, overcoming ignorance, you know, these are all purposeful reasons for doing what you're doing. So I think I've probably got only just a few minutes left. So I just want to end on reputation. I've talked a lot about reputation and not allowing others to define your brand, but managing it yourself and managing the message, so that you ensure that what's being said about you is, and the message that's going out there about you is the one that you want to land. So if personal branding is what you say about yourself, reputation is about what others say. There's a famous Jeff Bezos quote around that. Building that reputation around your purpose, amplifying that through your personal brand is the best way to clearly articulate who you are and what you stand for as a leader. So getting clarity around that and building your personal brand around it is key. So a few takeouts from this. Your personal brand is your reputation, and that reputation and that of the school that you lead are synonymous and can be impacted. Don't allow your brand to be defined by others. It may well work against you. Embrace yourself, embrace your authenticity, embrace your brand, and get clarity on it, because it will help position you for leadership and, you know, define and cement what you're about. And always be yourself. Align your conduct and your governance with your brand and what you want to be known for. You know, reputations are very precious. They take a long time to build, but a moment to lose. So I think we might have some questions, but I'm going to hand back to Fiona.
Thank you, Mel. That's great. Thank you very much. No, we've just got a few comments coming through the chat, but no direct questions. So I think, yeah, I think it's just been absolutely fantastic to listen to, you know, almost like a completely fresh perspective, and thinking about, you know, how our personal brand is being created and entrenched by everything we do, whether that's, you know, that we're aware of it or not, really. So, and just giving, you know, new school leaders and all school leaders that opportunity to think about what we stand for. So really, really, you know, completely different perspective and a different way of looking at things. So thank you very much for coming to speak to us today. You know, it's just been really valuable for everyone. So lovely to see you. Thank you very much.
No, not at all. Say that there are tons of books out there, as I say, and Google, and there's a lot of information on LinkedIn and the like. So if anybody's interested, it's there. It's not just what I say. It's out there. So there's lots of resources.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're going to take a break now, folks. Please go and look at our exhibitors on the main page, and you can get some points for win those prizes. Let me remind you of the prizes: 50 trees planted in your name from NAHT, School Leaders Thriving Programme from NAHT Wellness and Protect, a 6-month whole school subscription to Lifter, and a goodie bag from Discovery Education. I didn't say at the start that it's actually the winner takes all. I know it's a bit early in the day for thinking we might be at an ABBA tribute event, but the winner takes all of those prizes. You get points by going around the exhibitions and putting things in your goodie bag and logging on and looking at the websites. You get your points, you move up the leaderboard, and then you win 4 fabulous prizes for you and your school. So we are going to, let me just remind you to come back to the main page, and then you'll be choosing your workshop for the session after break. But thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this morning's keynotes, and we will see you back at the main agenda at 11:30. Thank you very much.